I'm Victor, and I used to be at Google when I worked on Angular 2, which is now known as just Angular. So just to repeat, last year my colleague Jeff Cross and I left the team at Google to start our company, Narrow.io. We provide Angular consulting to enterprise teams. And yes, I've been using JetBrains products like IntelliJ, RubyMine, PHP Storm, WebStorm for a long time, for over a decade now. And I tried to use other tools, and some of them I really liked, but I always came back. That's why I'm so excited to do this webinar today, to show you a few cool things about WebStorm that I use when I build Angular applications and I use when I work on the Angular framework itself. Because I think WebStorm is an excellent tool for web dev in general and an excellent option for Angular developers in particular. So my plan for today, so that's what I'm going to show you today if I don't derail myself. And I will try not to derail and stick to the plan. So I will start with some basic WebStorm configuration that surprisingly few people do. And I think if you just spend a few minutes on making it look exactly right, you'll be much happier. Then I will talk about the TypeScript support WebStorm provides. And it won't be an exhaustive list of features, just a few of key ones that I didn't see in other editors. Then I will switch gears and talk about Angular support. And finally, I will show a few things. I'll talk about the main reason why I like WebStorm, which is that the platform is very mature and it has a lot to offer. All right, before I jump into Angular and TypeScript, I would like to quickly go over a few things about configuring WebStorm and in general making it look exactly right and behave exactly right. Because I'm one of those people, and if my IDE doesn't look just right, I won't use it. Regardless of how awesome the Angular support is, it has to be exactly what I want it to be. And I know there are a lot of guys out there, a lot of folks out there that share my obsession. So let's talk about this first. As if you start WebStorm the very first time in your life, it won't look like mine at all. As first of all, it will have a lot more buttons and panels. And if you come from a, let me open something else so it's a little bit more interesting. And if you come from a different editor, let's say from Sublime, this may look a little bit heavy because you have a lot of buttons and panels everywhere, a little bit overwhelming. But I think it's actually useful. So when you start it the first time, it is useful to see all these visual clues, all the buttons and panels, because you can discover what the IDE does. You can discover all the important things that it can provide. But after a few days, because I do a lot of my work on a laptop, for example, I need the real estate, I would recommend you to just hide, get rid of all of this. I don't think it's really required. And instead, use find action command, which WebStorm supports. And so if you fire up find action and you can type any action you want, for example, any configurations, you can access any action in the IDE without touching the mouse and without clicking on any buttons. In general, I find WebStorm to be very keyboard-friendly, probably the most keyboard-friendly mainstream IDE out there. I can do pretty much anything without clicking on stuff or touching the mouse. For example, I can navigate to this section, the project view section, and even change its dimensions without touching the mouse. All right. The very next thing you need to do after you get rid of all the buttons is you need to set the tab limit to 1. To do that, you need to open the settings of WebStorm, search for tab limit, and in here, set this number to be 1. This is extremely important. Once you set it to 1, suddenly a lot of interactions with the IDE will be simpler. So now if I'm in my editor and I switch between different files like filters CSS, filters TS, as you can see I have one tab. I don't have multiple tabs, and I don't use tabs to navigate between files. Instead, I use recent files and recently edit files commands and dialogues. So if I want to navigate to a different file, I just fire up recent files and I just select the file I want to navigate to. If I use recently edited files, I can narrow down the list of files to the ones, because I played with this project before the webinar to make sure it works, everything is edited, but no, in a real project, the list will be way, way shorter. So with these changes, if you hide all the buttons, all the panels, and you have a single tab, the WebStorm will look a lot less heavy and very, very minimalistic. It will look way nicer. Okay, a few more things about the looks before we go into Angular. WebStorm, I think a year ago, added support for font ligatures, and you just have to use font ligatures. Okay, if you don't use font ligatures, your life is way worse than it could have been. So search for font in the settings and enable font ligatures. And if you write a lot of JavaScript, you'll have this nice arrow functions and lots of other things will look way, way nicer. And finally, because the IDEA platform, or the IntelliJ IDEA platform WebStorm is built upon, is very mature and has been around for a while, it has a lot of themes to choose from. Yes, I use the material theme, and if you, again, open the settings, search for plugins, you'll see that there is a material theme I have installed. You can install it the same way, and then your WebStorm will look as cool as mine, which is probably way cooler than the default one, in my mind. All right, next. People sometimes complain that WebStorm can be a little bit slow, which I don't think is fair right now. Yeah? The latest version of WebStorm, at least the EAP I'm using, has zero latency mode enabled by default. And this significantly increases the speed of typing and the responsiveness, the feel of the IDE. So prior to this, you would have to enable it yourself explicitly in a special file. Very few people knew about it. Nobody did it. So now it's enabled by default. So if you tried the WebStorm, let's say a year ago, and you felt it's a little bit slow, try it again and you'll be surprised. That's right now, it's not slow at all. Second, if you're working on large projects, like the way I do, you probably want to allocate a little bit more memory when you start your IDE, because all our laptops right now have lots of memory, like 16 gigs of memory at the very least. So allocate a few gigs for your project. The way to do it is you need to find this file and this special location. Location differs depending on your OS. If you're using Linux, it will be a different location. If you find this file, there's a file called WebStorm VM options. Here in this file, in this location, you can set the maximum memory per project, so the heap size that the IDE can use. In my case, it's about 3 gigs, which I find works fine. And by doing so, it will prevent frequent garbage collections that slow down, so it doesn't feel as fast if it constantly garbage collects. So try to do that too. All right. And the very, very last thing regarding the setup is I want to cover this plugin that I think John Lingvist put together called AceJump, because I'm astonished to find out how few people know about this plugin, considering how useful this plugin is. So let me show you the plugin. If you search for the plugins in the settings, there is a plugin called AceJump. And what does it do? Okay, it does one very, very important thing. It helps you to navigate around in your code way more efficiently, because usually developers navigate around using 2 main techniques. The first one is they use a mouse. As let's say they want to change this title property, they will use the mouse to click over here and type in some stuff. This is very slow because you have to constantly shift your hand from a keyboard to a mouse or to a trackpad. So just avoid doing this. It's usually a mistake. The second way of navigation is to use arrow keys and use relative navigation. So you do something like this, and then you type around. Okay. This works fine, especially if you use it in combination with something like next method. But AceJump does a much better job at navigating around. AceJump basically implements absolute navigation without using the mouse. You point with your eyesight to the place where you want to jump, you type a certain key, and your cursor will jump there. Let's say I want to jump to this T. If I fire up AceJump and I type T, WebStorm will show me all the T's around, all the T letters around my current position on the cursor, and it will tell me what to type to jump to a particular T. And so let's say I want to jump to the T in the title, I can type Q and I will be in this T. I can also type multiple characters to narrow it down to a shorter set of coordinates, and in this case there is only one, so I can jump over here. Anyway, so as a side note, by the way, because it's a webinar and I want it to be a little bit more visual, I will go slower and I won't use AceJump as much because it's hard to follow what I'm thinking because you cannot see what I'm staring at. Yes? So I will use the mouse and the cursor a little bit more just to show you what I'm looking at. But when I do work, I don't use the mouse at all, and I always use AceJump. All right, so if you want to apply some of what I showed you right now, you can look up the article I wrote on setting up WebStorm. We can probably provide a link in the description in this video, so you can set up your WebStorm exactly right. It will be fast, it will look very nice, very minimalistic, and you can jump around very efficiently. All right, now let's talk Angular. Let's start with creating a new project And you can do it by clicking new project, and we need to select the Angular CLI option over here. So there are two options. The AngularJS option is Angular 1.x, which is the old version of Angular, and Angular CLI is Angular 2.x and above. This is the new super duper great version of Angular. So we select this option, we provide the location, say test project, and we can click create. What will happen right now is WebStorm will use the globally installed Angular CLI to generate a project, which it already did, and it will, right now it's installing dependencies of this project. Angular CLI is a tool that's provided by the Angular team. So it's not provided by JetBrains guys. So you can use Angular CLI directly in the terminal. But if you are used to using IDE, you like the graphical interface, you can use it WebStorm to do it. As you can see, we can expand all these guys out these folders to see the structure of this project. And if you're familiar with Angular CLI, you'll see that this project is actually not WebStorm specific. So it's generated by CLI. It's a standard Angular CLI project. So meaning that if someone in your team doesn't use WebStorm, they can use this project in the same way. So it's in no way tied to WebStorm. Now we are done installing the node modules. We can fire up the terminal to check what we actually installed, yes, what we are using, by typing ng-version. This is the command we can run in the CLI to see what we are using. And we are using Angular 2.4.6, which is the latest stable as of now. So as a side note, by the way, you should try to use the built-in terminal. So last time when I used the terminal, which was years ago, it has some issues. But as far as I can tell, all the issues have been fixed, and now it's a very usable, nice terminal, and you don't have a reason not to use it. Okay, let's look at this project. And this project has a single component. It's a very simple project with a single component. We don't want to do that. And this component, again, is very, very simple. It just shows the title. It just shows a static string. It doesn't do anything interesting. So let's make it do something interesting. So what I want to do with this project right now is I want to generate two components, and I will call them home and about, and I'm going to set up the routing so I can navigate between the two components. So I can navigate to home and I can navigate to about. So how can we do that? One way to do it, and the way I usually do it, is I just fire up the terminal, and because I got used to using the terminal a lot, and I can generate, and as you can see, I played with it before, so it helps me a little bit, but you won't have all this auto completion. So I can generate the home component, and I can generate the about component exactly the same way. All right. So as you can see, the two components appeared in the project view. So we have the components ready, and these two components, again, very basic. They just show some static text, which is good enough for now. As a side note, by the way, I use the terminal to generate all these components because I'm used to using the terminal, and I happen to be often on the bleeding edge where not everything works exactly right in terms of integration. But if you're using the stable version of WebStorm and the stable version of CLI, you can also use the integrations that WebStorm has with the CLI to generate all this stuff. All right. So we have the two components. The two components are here, but they don't do anything. So what we want to do right now is to set up some routing so we can navigate between two of them. And one way to do that is we can create a file called routing.ts. It doesn't have to be called this way. Let's just call it this way. And in this file, we can use live templates that WebStorm comes with, the Angular 2.x and above live templates that you can use to generate sort of scaffolds for most commonly used sort of patterns in your code. And one of them is routing. If I type in ng2-routing, as you can see, there is a live template that I can use to generate a lot of code regarding the routing, to set up my routing. So I can do this, and I can fill it in, and which is very handy. So this is handy if you are learning the framework. Yes? If you don't know how to set it up exactly right, you can use a live template. WebStorm will generate a chunk of code for you, which you can fill in the gaps in, and then it sort of works. So I would recommend you to experiment with different live templates while you're learning the framework and you don't really know what's going on, like how to create all this stuff. So this is cool. I like it, but it's not as useful as I would say it is useful, but other editors and IDEs sort of provide some ways of using snippets or live templates. It's not that unique. What is more unique is what I want to show you next. So let's get rid of this file because I actually don't do that. Yes, I'm familiar with the framework. I don't generate a lot of scaffolds. I usually just write my code myself. So let's jump into the main module of this application. This is the main module that loads everything, that bootstraps everything. And let's start typing the list of imports. Let's start typing the router M. So what we see right now is very interesting, actually. So WebStorm suggests a bunch of options to autocomplete. And one of them is the router module. If we look around in this file, we'll see that the router module, so the router package is not referenced anywhere. We do not import the router module. We do not touch the router package in any way. We just have it as a dependency in our package.json, which is really cool. So WebStorm is aware that this symbol is present somewhere, and it offers this or suggests this suggestion. If I accept it, it will do the following two things. First, it will obviously autocomplete the symbol in place, but it will also import the symbol from the right module. And this is extremely useful. So if I do this right now, as you can see, this guy appeared over here, which is pretty cool. But it also imported this guy from the right module. And once you've used to it, to auto-importing, it's very, very hard to go back and not to have it around. Yes? Because it's very hard to remember, at least for me, yes? It's very hard to remember where every symbol lives, lots of packages, like I don't want to remember. Yes? And WebStorm just takes this pain away, and it's very nice. All right, let's quickly fill in, I actually need for root here, the routes for the two newly created components. I have the home component, and I have the about component like this. And okay, so these are the routes for our application. What I want to show you next is how WebStorm can optimize imports. So we just saw that WebStorm can auto-import stuff. Well, that's really cool, but it can do way more. And to show that, let's just jump over here, and let's say I import two other tokens from the same package, as Angular router, and I'll have two tokens. One of them is routes, and another one is the router state snapshot. The routes is a token which is an interface describing the structure of this configuration. I'm passing into for root. And the router state snapshot represents the state of the router, which I'm not going to use here actually. So we have this line over here, like a separate import from the same package. And what's interesting is that the IDE tells us that the import is not used. We can safely remove it because none of the symbols listed over here are actually used in this file. That's pretty cool. Let's change it a little bit to make the example more interesting. So if I do this, so I will extract this routes variable, and just to make it more interesting, let's annotate it with the right type. Yes, which is the type? This type. So what we have right now is what we have right now is a slightly different situation. So we know that this import is no longer unused. So it is used. We cannot safely remove it, and that's why it's no longer gray. Only this symbol in the import, the snapshot, is gray, meaning that it's not used and can be safely removed. And that's pretty cool in itself, that we can look and see what we can remove and what not. What is even better is that I can write the optimize import command. Okay, let me do it one more time. I can write the optimize imports command to get rid of this guy and in general take care of my imports. So if I run this command right now, you will notice two things that will happen to these two imports. The first thing is that these two imports will be merged into one. Because they come from the same package, it's actually nice to have a single import instead of two. The second thing that will happen is that this token, the symbol, router state snapshot, will be removed. Yes, it will disappear because it's not used in this file. No point to import it. Okay, let's run this command, optimize imports. Boom. So we have a single import, and the unused symbol is gone. Okay. Basically, the WebStorm TypeScript support is really robust, and you don't need to worry about managing imports at all. Yes, it's taken care of. The IDE will add imports for you when needed, and will remove them when they are no longer needed. And I think it's one of the main pain points people have when switching from Angular 1.x to Angular 2. They do not know where to import stuff from. It looks very scary. There are a lot of import statements. So if your tool can take care of all this scariness, it's just easier, and the framework is more pleasant to use. All right, let's finish this app just to show that it works. So if I go to this component and I jump into its template, I can add the outlet. Note, by the way, that the IDE tells me that the router outlet directive is available. So it helps me to write this code because, as far as I understand, it looks at all the directives available in the scope and it finds a directive with this selector. So hence, there should be an element called router outlet. So what the framework will do, by the way, it will load the component, the home or about component from the configuration into this place, into this outlet. So we have the outlet. Now let's add two buttons so we can switch between the two routes. So we'll have a button called home, the button called about. And the home button will navigate to the home route, and the about button will obviously navigate to the about route. Pretty simple. If I fire up the terminal right now and I run ngserve, the Angular CLI will use Webpack and Webpack dev server to serve our application, which I will show you right now over here. Okay, so as you can see, this is our application. We can switch between the two routes. It all works, and the URL, by the way, here changes as well. All right, it was very basic. I still think it's kind of impressive that we were able to generate a new project, use Scaffold to generate a lot of configuration, use auto importing to help us to write the configuration, and in a matter of like 2 minutes, we were able to build this app that kind of works. So that's cool. We looked at some basic Angular support and some basic TypeScript support. In reality, though, we don't create new projects all that often. At least I don't create new projects all that often. I tend to make changes to existing projects. And let me show you a few things that WebStorm can do there. Yes, when you have an existing project, you want to navigate around, maybe refactor it a little bit. And to do that, I'll open a project I often use in my blog posts and in my talks. This is the project. Okay. And one thing I want to show you. Okay, let me show you one thing real quick before we go into this project. And this thing I discovered like a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's awesome. So if I remove some of the dependencies in this is the package.json file for this project. So these are dev dependencies of this project. And as you can see, I depend on Webpack. This project is a Webpack project. I can remove this dependency, and let's say it's not there. Let's pretend it's not there. And what will happen if I start typing Webpack? The WebStorm will show me. So it will auto-complete the project, will show me all the options available, and will show me all the available versions. Okay, just a nice thing, nothing to do with Angular, but sort of one of those small nice things you stop noticing after a while because they work, and we tend to notice things that do not work. All right, let's look at the project that I'm going to show you. So let's serve the project using the Webpack dev server, and this is what the project looks like. Basically, it's a simple, come on. Okay, it's a simple application that shows us a list of tag talks that you can filter, you can watch them, and you can rate them. And the filtering works as follows. I can type in something in the title field, and I will see only the talks where the title matches the filter. And I can use other filters as well. It's a very simple app. We are going to look right now in depth into this filter section. Okay, this is the filters component we are interested in. All right. Since we highly recommend, we in the Angular team highly recommend you to use TypeScript when building modern Angular applications, I think the WebStorm TypeScript support actually has a big impact, or the big part of why I think it's an excellent choice for Angular devs. Because if you are new to WebStorm, you need to make sure your TypeScript is set up right. Yes, to do that, you need to open the settings for your project, type in TypeScript in here, and you need to make sure that this checkbox, Use TypeScript Service, is on. It is on by default in the new version of WebStorm, and it has been for a while, but just make sure it's on, because if it's off, the experience you'll get won't be as good. Second, if you open this TypeScript panel, you need to make sure, at least as of now, that this checkbox, show project errors, is off. And I know it's being reworked, and soon it will be on, it will be wonderful. As of now, if it's off, the TypeScript support is just quicker, as it feels faster. So I think it's worth to turning it off just to have a better typing experience. All right? Okay. So we have our project. Let's open the filters component I was talking about. This is the component with 3 filters: speaker, title, and the rating. When it comes to TypeScript, WebStorm, as most editors and IDEs, provides sort of robust auto-completion and navigation capabilities. So you can, if I type in filters, as you can see, it knows that filters is the field available in this component, and it knows all the methods and properties that the filter, the form group class has. Okay, so that works reliably. And in opposite to just plain JavaScript, where WebStorm often sort of guesses what may work, here it knows, yes, because the type information is available. So auto-completion is more reliable. Yes, if you haven't used TypeScript before, you should use it just for that. Also, navigation works. If I click on filters, you know where to jump and whatnot. So, but everyone does it. So all editors do it. It's still really cool, but WebStorm does a little bit more than that. For example, it provides the most widely used refactorings, such as extract method, extract variable, inline, change signature, this kind of stuff that we use, especially if you come from backend. If you happen to write Java every day, you get used to those very quickly. So let's say I have this constructor, and I don't like to do more work in this constructor. I want to extract this chunk of code into a separate method. So I can do that by selecting it and extracting the method, and let's say put setup change event, and have this method extracted for me. And of course, if I have the same chunk of code duplicated multiple times, WebStorm will figure out the same chunk of code and it will dedupe all the code for me. And I mean, it's surprisingly useful in many situations. Similarly, I can inline the method back. As if I have it extracted and I change my mind and I want to regroup it and refactor it, often the way you do it is you inline everything in one file, you refactor it, you move it around, and then you extract into different methods again. Yes. So I can do it by using a different command, and I can inline the method, and I'm given here 2 options. I can either keep the method because I don't know where it can be used, because the JavaScript, so we can ignore the type information, so we don't really know, or I can remove the method and sort of properly inline it, which I'm going to choose right now. Okay. So this kind of refactoring works. It's very useful. And if you come from any other language but JavaScript, you'll be like, yeah, of course it works. Why wouldn't it work? But it's actually very rare for an editor supporting TypeScript to provide anything but renaming. So it's awesome. All right. So the TypeScript support that WebStorm provides is really cool. Refactoring, navigation, all works fine. But it also provides a lot. A lot is built specifically for Angular. And the main thing that I like is the support for language service that WebStorm recently gained. I think the EAP, at least I'm using, has this support. And I'm not sure if the latest stable has it. So if the latest stable doesn't have it, use the EAP because the support is so useful. So what is this language service? So similar to the TypeScript team, which provides language service, that's why the TypeScript support in so many editors is excellent. The Angular team decided to provide a service, a process that runs and provides useful information to all the editors and IDEs. And so it tells you, for example, Angular-specific error messages, or it enables some sort of navigation that is Angular-specific, not just TypeScript. To take advantage of this service, you need to do 2 things in WebStorm. First, you need to make sure that this service is installed. Yes, it's a dev dependency in your package.json, which I do here, for example. If you look at my dev dependencies for this project, you will see that I have the language service installed. So do that. That's one. Second, you need to make sure that WebStorm has the service enabled, yes, so it uses the information provided by the service. And to do that, you need to open Settings, type in TypeScript, find the TypeScript configuration, and click on this Configure button, and just make sure this guy is on. I think it's on by default, but if you don't see the right error messages, make sure it's on. Maybe you turn it off by accident or whatever. So this guy has to be on. Once you have it on, you have a much better Angular support. So let me show you what I mean. So let's open the filters component we just looked at. It's the same component. And let's open the template. One thing, by the way, that I want to point out is that WebStorm actually knows what this string filters.html is referring to, the file it's referring to. So it managed to navigate to the right file, and it can also preview this file, which is very, very useful. Anyway, so I have this component over here, and over here I have its template. So let's say obviously right now the template works, but let's say it's broken. Let's say I have a typo, and I missed an R here. So it used to be fine, and now it's no longer fine. Yeah, so I have a typo over here. If I hover over, what I will see is an error message, which is not generic. It's an Angular-specific error message. And it is provided by that language service I showed you a second ago, which is really cool. Also, I want to show you that if I start typing in this binding, the auto-completion works. So what I see right now is the properties available on the component on the left. There are two properties, change and filters, and I see only those. So the WebStorm, like the IDE, actually knows the type of this. The type of this is known, which is really cool. And note that the auto-completion here is reliable. So WebStorm usually is smart enough to provide some sort of set of options. It tries to figure out what you may want, if there is no information available. And if you actually disable the language service here, you will see a giant list of potential properties that you may be interested in, which is, kind of useful. But with the language service, WebStorm doesn't have to guess anymore because it knows. The language service tells the IDE like the exact list of things that can be used here. So let me change it to filters. Okay. So that works. How the completion works and works reliably, works in templates. Now let's say I want to rename this property. I don't like the name. I want it to be called filters form. Yes. If I do that, what will happen is the rename will work not just in the template, where it obviously worked, but also in the corresponding component class. The property has been renamed here, and the usage of the property was updated as well, which is really cool. And finally, let's say I just have the template and the component class is somewhere else. I can use all the basic navigation preview capabilities that WebStorm provides. Yes, I can look at the definition of this field. That is pretty cool. I can jump to the definition of this field. And I can also look at usages of this field as well. Let me show you one last thing regarding usages. If I open a different component, because this wasn't very interesting, like rate button. So if you remember the application I showed you had this list of talks and had a button called rate that would rate a talk. And the way the button works is that it allows you to rate your talk only once. So once you rate the talk, the button gets disabled. So this is the template of this button. Just shows the button, and it gets disabled if your rating property is present on the stock object, on the model. Okay, so let's say we want to find the usages of this property. Okay, we have this property in a template in HTML. If I fire up the find usages command, the IDE will show me a bunch of things. It will show me where the property is defined, which is over here. So it knows where it's defined. It's useful. It will show me all the usages in the TypeScript. This is some fake data I have in my application, and it will show me, and this is one usage too in TypeScript, and it will show me the usages in HTML. Okay, so all this stuff like navigation, refactoring, find usages, previews, works transparently and works across templates and TypeScript. So if you're building new Angular applications like Angular 2.x and above, you have all the tooling support in your HTML that you would previously get only in JavaScript or TypeScript. All right, that was some basic Angular support and some, I think, really cool features that WebStorm can provide. Now, finally, I want to show you the main reason why I like WebStorm. And to do that, I want to open the Angular project itself. So this is the Angular framework. Just open something interesting. Okay, it's the Angular framework. And I want to show you the main reason why I like it, why I use WebStorm for building Angular apps and why I use it for working on the framework itself. And it's not the TypeScript support, even though I think it's really good. And it's not the Angular support, even though I think it's the best out there. But it's the fact that it just can do a lot of stuff. Yes, it's built on top of a very mature platform, and that platform has a lot to offer. Let's imagine, yes, we are looking at this large TypeScript project that happens to use Angular, but doesn't have to. And let's say we want to investigate something about this project. Yes, and just for the sake of this example, let's say we want to investigate a thing or two about the Angular router. By the way, let me show you the project. The project is huge. It's a lot of code, like over 100,000 lines of TypeScript, lots of different modules. Right now, we happen to be in this router module. And let's say we want to investigate how the Angular router works. In particular, I want to find out when the can activate guard that the router supports runs. So the guards is a special feature of the router that prevent you from navigating certain URLs if you don't have, say, right permissions. So we know about the feature, but we want to find out exactly how it works, maybe to contribute to the framework or to troubleshoot an issue. Okay, so we opened the framework, we checked out the repo, we fired up the WebStorm. So what do? We can start the way I would do it. I would start with the double shift with search everywhere to find something that is named can activate. So if I type in can activate in this dialog, I will see that there are a bunch of sticks available. And basically, WebStorm shows me all the symbols, pretty much anything that has roughly the same name as can activate. And one of the things that it shows me is an interface called can activate. That seems very relevant, yes, because it's exactly what I'm looking for. So I can open this guy. And we see the definition of this interface. And what I can do, I can expand the docs, yes, and I can read through the docs to find out more about this interface, which I'm not going to do right now, obviously. And note, by the way, that the Angular framework is somewhat well documented. So usually you can read through the docs and discover what's going on. But in most real applications, like client applications that I work with, like there is no documentation. So the source code is the only thing that's available. And so I don't have the luxury of actually reading and understanding the documentation. So I'm looking at this interface right now, and it seems relevant. You know, I want to discover how this can activate guard works when it runs in regards to other guards and other parts of the router. The signature seems relevant, so I think I may want to come back here and return to this place to read up more about this interface, maybe to read these docs more carefully. Because I want to go back, I will add a bookmark, and a bookmark with a mnemonic to make sure I don't forget about this place. And basically, right now, WebStorm prompts me asking, like, hey, do you want to come back? Which letter or number you can use, you would like to use to jump back to this place? And because the file is called interfaces, and I'm looking at the interface, I will use the I letter. So if I do this, I can see this guy in the gutter indicating that there is a bookmark. And anytime I want to jump to this place, I can use this letter with a special shortcut to jump to this place, to this file, to this line. What I want to do next is to search for usages of can activate. So I know there is an interface. Now I want to find out all the places where this interface is referenced. Okay? And I can do that by using the show usages command, which is very flexible. Because note the following. Yes, we have all these usages, a list of usages, and there is one usage in the comment. And the rest are just index files and spec files, which you can safely ignore, because those are not very useful for us, because we are trying to investigate production code. So let's jump to this usage in the comment. Okay? It is very important that this is a comment and not like TypeScript code, as WebStorm used, because WebStorm used its smarts to find this usage. As the project is TypeScript based, it's written using TypeScript, but it's not fully typed. It's clearly, we lost type information somewhere because this interface wasn't referenced from any place in the code. You know, it was only referenced in the comment. And most real-world projects are partially typed. The fact that WebStorm can be more flexible and find this usage is actually very helpful. So if I select this guy right now and search in this file, I will see that we have a property named the same way. And so it's probably related, and we can see that the type information here is lost. It's any for some reason. I actually know why it's any because I remember writing it. But you know, so we lost some type information, and we managed to find this place, this usage, only because WebStorm figured out that the string the temp in the comment is actually sort of related to the interface I was curious about. And again, so this place seems relevant. We may want to come back. So let's add a bookmark with a mnemonic, so we have a way to jump back here in case we want to investigate how this configuration works. Okay, I can do that by using this shortcut, and I actually use very different shortcuts, so what you see is not what I use. And let's say I will use the letter C because this is the configuration. Cool, so we have two bookmarks. We've been to interfaces, we found a configuration where we sort of use the interfaces. Let's look at the usages of this property because it seems to be very important. So if I do this, and I ignore all the specs because I don't care about those, I will see that there is a usage in the file called router.ts, which seems to be very relevant. Okay, router.ts seems to be the file that I want to look at. It's in production code, it's named properly. Let's jump over there. What I can see here is a method called run can activate. And this method, what it does, it seems to be running this guard. Yes, it's a lot of code and it's kind of nasty, but if you read carefully and spend another minute, you'll see that it's running the guard. So if I try to find how this guy has been used, I will see that it's single usage in this method called check guards, okay? Which seems to be very relevant because that's what I'm investigating. I'm investigating how guards in the framework work. And it seems to me that we're reading this collection of checks and we are running guard from the checks. We can look up and see what the collection is. And yes, the collection of guards, so it seems. Okay, that's useful. So what we need to find out now is how do we populate this collection of checks? Because we know we're reading it here. So at some point, somewhere, we'll write stuff in that collection. And that code that writes stuff, pushes elements into that collection is what we need to find out because that stuff basically will define the order in which guards run. So what I can do is I can highlight all the usages of this collection in this class. I can scroll around, and I can quickly find out that, hey, this is a place where we push stuff into this collection. And here I can see that the order is we can push can deactivate first, and then we push can activate. So we found out the order in which guards run. Okay, that's pretty cool. It sort of matches our intuition, I guess. What we can do next, if I were to investigate where exactly we run the guards, I can open the structure of this file and find out that this method and everything I've been looking at is inside its pre-activation class. Okay, if I jump over here, this is the class that seems to be responsible for running the guards. Okay, I can find usages of this class, and we can ignore the specs. And there is a single place in production code where we create an instance of this class. So if I jump to this place, we see that yes, I created an instance over here, and then the code is nasty, but just bear with me. And I do a few things with an instance of this class. First, I check the guards, and that's basically what I was interested in. And then I do the resolution of data, so I can resolve data, fetch all the resources, and then if I scroll down, I can find out that activation happens later on. All right, so we found out everything we wanted to find out. Yes, we know that can deactivate guard runs before can activate, and we know the order in which the router runs all the steps. It runs guards first, and then it runs activate resolvers, and then it runs the rest of the navigation. What is really cool here is that I can retrace all the steps that I went through to discover this place using the bookmarks I left. Yes, if I fire up this dialog, show bookmarks, I will see these are the bookmarks I left. Yes, one of them is a configuration, another one is an interface that I've been to. And I can use this mnemonic to jump to those places very easily. Yes, I can open it, type I, and I will jump to the interface. I can do the same at type C, and now I jump to the configuration. And so I will use it as breadcrumbs that I left along the way while discovering what this particular feature of the router does and how it's implemented. All right. Basically, to recap this section, I think that navigation capabilities of WebStorm are really good, superb. And in this example, I used two features. One of them was bookmarks with mnemonics. It's very handy because you can leave sort of breadcrumbs as you discover things about the idea, about a particular project. And I use smart find usages. Smart meaning that it works in partially typed programs, because we actually lost type information along the way in this project, but we were able to still find out what's used where, because WebStorm is slightly more flexible than like a typical find usages would be. Okay, and most real-world TypeScript apps, applications, aren't fully typed. And so it happens, people just ignore types sometimes to just make the compiler shut up, or if they use an untyped library, some legacy library. And this is a big part of why I like this idea and what I use for when I do work for clients, because I tend to be I'm jumping into large projects with like tens of thousands of lines of code, which is not fully typed. As being able to navigate like this efficiently, discover what these applications do, is very important in my line of work, and it's important pretty much for everyone. Especially useful if you are discovering new stuff about open source projects. You checked out a new open source project and you want to find out how it works. Like this exercise was a fake exercise because I know exactly how the Angular framework works. So I knew where to jump. But if I open a new open source project, that's exactly what I would do. I would jump around, use find usages, a lot of bookmarks along the way, to basically find out what those projects do and to learn about how they work. All right, so let me summarize what I tried to show you, and then we can do a Q&A. What I tried to show you is a few things. Yes, first of all, I tried to show you that WebStorm can be easily customized. Like within minutes, you can make it look like whatever you want. Yes, it can look very minimalistic, has a huge collection of themes and plugins. So just spend 5 minutes making it look exactly right. You'll be way happier. Second, I showed you this excellent TypeScript support, and it does some basic stuff that everyone else does, which is navigation of the completion, which is still cool. But it also provides refactoring and import management capabilities, which I think is way more rare. And once you get used to those, it's very hard not to have them when you write your code. Then I showed you some Angular support, just sort of a glimpse of what it can do. Yes, it integrates with the CLI. It can generate new projects, and you can run commands, CLI commands from the IDE. It has a bunch of live templates that's useful for those who are learning the framework and for those who aren't very experienced with the framework. It integrates with an Angular language service, which I think is a killer feature. Yes, I think it's available only in the EAP, and if it's the case, just install the EAP because just it rocks so much. It's really good. It provides refactorings that work across templates and TypeScript. Find usages that again works across templates and TypeScript. Overall, almost everything works nicely across templates and TypeScript. So you feel that you'll never lose your tooling when you work on Angular. And finally, the main reason why I like it that much is that it's very mature and it can do a lot of stuff. There's a lot to offer. I showed you just a tiny part of what it can do as an example, which is you can work in partially typed programs efficiently, and so it happens most real-world programs are partially typed, and the navigation works reliably, and it's very nice. That's basically the main reason why I like it so much. Anyway, that's everything I have. So I'm happy to answer some questions if I can.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. That was really awesome, and I guess many people enjoyed that. We have a couple of questions. The first one is from Konstantin. He asks how NG2 routing will be managed after Angular 4 release. Do you know anything about that?
Yep. So the Angular 4 release in general it's nothing to do with WebStorm, but I can still answer. The Angular 4 release, it sounds scary because it's 4, but it's actually not a break and change. A few things will be duplicated, and the router all the routing configuration you have right now in Angular 2 should keep working unless broken by accident, which most likely won't happen. Basically, it should keep working in Angular 4. A few things will be duplicated. So in Angular 5, which will happen, I think it's in September, Angular 5 is going to be released in September, you'll have to change maybe some stuff in the router configuration, but you don't need to worry about Angular 4 at all. It will remain exactly the same.
Yeah, cool. Another question is, can you show us a bit of debugging or debugging tests, or would it be a bit too complicated? Or maybe you can give an advice how to start debugging Angular app.
Okay, so I think it might be a bit too complicated, but the way I do debugging is I don't actually use WebStorm for debugging. I don't even know why. I use WebStorm for debugging node processes when I have an issue with, like, let's say, the TypeScript compiler. But when I debug test, I usually just use Chrome. So like, I don't think whatever I show you will be relevant to WebStorm. I just use Chrome normally.
Okay, no problem. We also have another question about refactoring.
Yep.
So if I change the type on a parameter, is it possible somehow to see all the places in the project that break? I guess that should be possible with the TypeScript tool window.
Yep, so if you open what I showed you not to use, if you use it, you will see all the places. Just remember to turn it off because it will slow down your project. And as far as I know, I actually was following the issue why it's like a little bit slow. It should be fixed on it. It shouldn't be slow anyway. So the way you do it is Jesus Christ. Okay, there you go. You open this window, and if you, let's say it's a number, yes. And I mean, it's broken now, and you can see it shows you some errors over here because we happen to be in the same file. But if you enable this option, which is project errors, it will show you all the errors in the project. So if something is inconsistent somewhere, which it looks like we have something in node module that's actually broken, it basically will show you all the errors in the project, including, so it seems, node modules. But remember to turn it off for now, because otherwise, if it's on, your auto completion will be slower, and you will see, like, the error messages will appear slower, like later. Any other questions?
No, I think we are good.
All right, cool.
Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar. It was really awesome. If you want to follow Victor on Twitter, it's Victor Savkin. You can also follow WebStorm ID. And sure, if you want to learn more about WebStorm, just go to our website. So thank you everyone for watching, and hope to see you later.
All right, thank you so much.
Victor.
All right, thanks. All right,
thanks.
bye.
Bye.